confirm one more before we get started?
Yeah, we're all good to kick off, Cody.
Great. Okay, we'll go ahead and kick off now. So thank you, Gwen, and thanks everyone for joining this morning. My name is Cody Campbell, and I'm the product manager for the AppEnhancer platform here at OpenText. And I'm excited today to talk to you about our 25.2 release and what's new in that product, and what's new in the innovation release, we're calling it, and what's next in our roadmap, what's coming up in the 25.4 release and beyond. And so we're very excited to show what we've been working on and show some of the future enhancements that are coming out and answer your questions about some of these things. And also we have a survey that we'll be providing throughout this session so that you can provide us some feedback on some of the portions of the product you use and the versions you run. And we'll get to that as we move through the presentation. But again, welcome everyone to the presentation. First things first, we have this is a product management discussion about product roadmaps. And so certainly we are looking at forward-thinking statements. So this is a standard disclaimer for, the fact that the roadmap could change based on feedback from customers just like yourselves and market conditions. So just keep that in mind. So today we're going to talk about the product in brief. Gwen and Fabio and I have all been very focused on getting the new release out, and we're certainly very excited to talk about it, and we're excited to moderate your questions. So we're going to have a session for QA at the end, but really it's about talking about the direction and vision of the product, what our strategic direction is for the product, and what our latest release looks like, and then the future releases beyond. So it's really, again, excited to tell you that I kind of gave some introductions earlier, but my name is Cody Campbell. I'm the product manager overseeing the AppEnhancer platform. I have Fabio Barbosa here, who's a director over our development group, the engineering team that develops this product. And then Gwen, she is our manager for the strategy of the portfolio that we're in, the document management. And she's really been helping me get a lot of the enablement material out there to help customers and partners and OEMs utilize the product as best as possible and make use of the new features that we're building. And so the three of us are really excited to talk about the platform. And as we know, AppEnhancer is a enterprise content management system very specific around document management. And we provide a comprehensive set of features around capture, indexing, management and viewing and redacting, manipulation of documents. And then we get into integrations, which is really where we are very powerful in providing our viewer, providing our services, providing our interfaces to other third-party applications or partner-driven solutions so that we can build this into other products and leverage content management as a document management system for another system, maybe a departmental solution or a whole core competency product like a healthcare system. And so really, this allows you to bolt document management onto an existing system, an existing data systems, or a department software solution to be able to not have to do content management within those products because some of them don't do it very well. And so nonetheless, we integrate, but we also provide all of the security and retention and protection for that content. And then automation around workflow, customizable workflows for the enterprise, and then some built-in workflows we'll talk about today for more basic features. Really, it's about bringing document management to other systems and not bringing the giant system to you so that you can do more than just document management. We want to complement, we want to extend, we want to enhance existing solutions with our system, with an enterprise-grade content management solution for documents. And so that's what AppEnhancer is. And when we look at our themes for the direction of this product, it's about taking that content and putting it to work. Really, the indexing is where it all comes to from an image into metadata and textual content. Ways that we can start reading that content and putting it to work is by automating the indexing process of it. But more importantly, once it's indexed, how can we work with that content, especially in like IDLE where we have a lot of full text data? We can start to summarize content for you. So if you're a caseworker that's maybe going through a few different documents for a certain case, like maybe you're a loan officer, or maybe you're working on a real estate project, but you've got a collection of documents to work with, and some of these documents could be hundreds of pages long. And so the ability to summarize that content quickly is a huge, low hanging fruit kind of solution when it comes to AI. And it's a way to put our content to work for use cases around like case management and around like loan processing and other documents, other areas where you want to like maybe look at the content at a higher level and get some insights on that content rather than sift through it all. Claims management in healthcare is another one of those where you have to really review a lot of content in order to validate the claim. And there's ways to utilize some of the newer technology around intelligent indexing, around LLM kind of style of AI searching to be able to get that summarization. And so that's something we'd like to play into the product over the next couple of years is, allow you to access that content in a better way, in a more intelligent way. When we look at like how we can recognize content and process it better as it's coming in, back to that automated indexing, that's around increasing our recognition capability. We have tools that OpenText builds, toolkits that Micro Focus has brought to the table as well, that allow us to really work with more rich featured style content. And I'm talking barcodes, OCR in the zone, so we can build like templates and indexing, screen reading, which we've had in the past, but scraping your screen so that you can pull stuff off of more ancient green screens that still exist and things like that. But really, it's about putting our technology stack together with the AppEnhancer platform to help, bring all the viewing capabilities back to a single place where you can see XML and JSON data in a more rich feature set. So you're not looking at textual content, you can put that to work, you can translate it into a more rich document. And so we can use the tools that IDLE provides. We can use Aviator, we can use large language model tooling to be able to bring that content to light rather than just have a static archive. That's probably one of the biggest things that we want to do over the next couple of years is make it more active. We want to simplify some of the workflow. We have a enterprise class workflow engine in OPA. And the OPA, the OpenText Process Automation Suite, we rename products frequently around here, but what was formerly AppWorks is our enterprise class workflow engine. And that allows you to do anything from invoice processing to large accounting workflows for like approvals, document reviews, any kind of document-centric workflow that you could think of to kick off different services can be done within that engine. But it requires, even if it's low code, it still requires an administrative / development role to be able to manage it. And so that's where we're, you have a project. We don't have a built-in capability for that. So what we've been doing is building in a new engine called Flowable. And the Flowable engine is an open source technology stack that allows us to do basic workflow inside the product. It's not quite able to reach some of those enterprise class workflow functions, which is more like connected to third-party systems and working at dealing with objects that are distributed in a more cloud-centric environment. This is something that would be built into the platform to work with our content. But the AppWorks is still certainly the solution for enterprise-grade workflow where you're maybe integrating across a large corporate platform. But Flowable's built into the product and allows you to basically push a document from one user to another for an approval, for like a basic routing approval. Those document routing solutions are extremely valuable for users that just want to have somebody review something. And so we built the workflow into the product a couple releases ago to get people started with it. And when I say people, I'm talking about our engineering style customers, which are more channel partners, OEM partners that might have some development level skills because we didn't really have a UI for it in the past. We had the integration was there for you to play with, to use with our workflow integration module, and to use with the EDB, but there's no front side to it. And that's what we're working on in the future is building the front end to allow you to route documents, to do basic approvals. When you're talking about an accounting workflow, that's probably going to be better suited for AppWorks. When you're talking about, connected to third-party systems or across, like I said, a giant corporate stack, probably going to use AppWorks for that. Global's built for content within AppEnhancer, and it's embedded. And so it's not really built to connect to a bunch of different systems. You probably could do it, but it's not designed for that specifically with the use case we're going after. And so I just want to be clear that it's around document routing and simple review and approval and the basic documents moving between users within this system. But when we talk about other systems, you might want to consider a larger solution like the AppWorks solution. Now, the extensibility of Global is there, but you would have to buy the enterprise version of it, which is now a charged solution, not a free version. So the free version can do the basics, and that's what we want. We want a free, out-of-the-box, built-in workflow that you don't have to pay for. But it's not going to do everything. It's going to do the basics, and that's really what a lot of our customers have come to us and said. They just want some basic routing. You could probably customize those basics, but they'll only take you so far before you probably need to graduate into a different, into the AppWorks system. So we'll take questions on that because I know there's been a lot of questions since the last release when it comes to Flowable, because it's behind the scenes. It's not a front-facing thing right now, and that's to change soon. And we'll see that when we get to the product roadmap. And that's kind of moving into our modern interface. What we're building is a new UI for the platform using our JADO tooling, which JADO stands for Jet Assisted Takeoff. It's kind of that airline themed tooling that we have now these days, like Aviator and such. But nonetheless, it is a framework of UI tooling that allows us to distribute a OpenText standard UI. And that UI has a rich set of controls and a standard look and feel that matches a lot of the current product lines in our OT cloud. And a lot of the 25.2 and 4 products will start to come out with this UI. And we happen to be one of the first in the portfolio to do this, to adopt this. And it is a large framework. And we actually had to break this into a couple phases. And I'll talk about that as we go through the roadmap and the slide deck, because you're going to see it evolve. And we'll talk about that a little bit. I don't want to go directly into that because it's a bit of a discussion. But a new UI is very important to this product because we have a lot of remnants of EMC, and even OTG is some of our old UI. It's important to show you as our customers that this is being invested in. OpenText sees this as a valuable product in the stack, and we're putting our efforts into making it look and feel like a modern product from OpenText, and not something that just came along for the ride. And I think that's really important because we're investing in this product and we're building new features, and we're allowed to go and take technology from OpenText and reprice it to fit the needs of our mid-market customers. That's great. We have access to Idle. We have access to a lot of different technologies that would be just pricing us out of our price point. And because we have the technology, we own it, we can put price that's specifically tied to this product. So it
Just
really
a
helps us.
comment on JADO there, Cody. JADO is an OpenText company-wide initiative to modernize product interfaces, and we're happy to say that AppEnhancer is one of the first adopters of that. So that's also great news for the product in terms of innovation, and our engineering team is adopting one of the first to adopt this new OpenText framework. So you'll see it across other OT products in case you use any of those, and we'll be one of the first to use it.
Thanks, Glenn. I'm really excited about that, and I'm glad that we got to be one of the first to kick the tires on it and give some feedback on the needs that we have for the UI, because it's a generic framework that can be applied to lots of products, but there's some specific use cases that are basic for us, and we've been able to provide feedback to the team to get certain needs met for our product as well. And it's great to have that to be upfront with a lot of our flagship products and getting the new UI. So again, back to what we've built with the new UI tooling and the new design standards is a new web UI we'll show you today, or the new web engine and some of the architecture behind it. And then obviously the REST APIs that we continue to build out. And I'll talk about the unified web server, which is a consolidation of a lot of things to make it simpler for a developer to work with the platform. And we'll talk about that. Then we have some white label based components, and that's basically our viewer and using some of our interfaces to bypass the front door, so to speak, and to get to the content, and then provide a view or a result set or a document view back to the end user, so that it can be stuff to do an iframe or put up into a pop-up or something like that, so they can get the document from within their application. So again, those APIs and those UIs are the interfaces that our users and our developers are getting into the platform with. And then lastly, we still have a desktop presence. Like this has been a point of contention for us for a long time because this product grew out of the desktop. And so users that have been using this product for 20 some years are intimately familiar with the desktop components. But the problem is they're an ancient technology stack and they're very difficult to support. And so we run into the need for a desktop user to have certain levels of access to desktop related content or objects or hardware to be able to scan or print or drag and drop content into the system without having to open the website and upload it through a web call, which sometimes could time out if you have really large amounts of content. But this is more a localized thing for users to have instant access to AppEnhancer. And that's what our connector is. And we brought the connector back to be able to fill that gap, but we've enhanced it in a way I think you'll be excited to see to cover some of those desktop use cases that AppEnhancer Desktop 20.4 is now covering for certain users. And so we've got full parity, and all the functions in desktop are available on the web today. We did that a while ago, so we have that parity today. But folks that really, really, really want that desktop capability, and that's for if you're like using the virtual printer to print into the environment, that needs a desktop location. If you're using some of the drag and drop functionality and some of the newer functionality that we're adding, like around screen scraping and such, again, it's localized. It's for a desktop. That's where the use case is. So web applications don't work so well for that, and that's where the connector comes in to kind of fill the void that desktop left behind as it became retired. And so I'm excited to show you some of the new features we're putting into that as well today. And then lastly is more on the back end, but it's important. It's very important because we're distributing this product with two different sets of installations now. We have a Docker image group, which you can pull right out of the registry and install into a Docker or Kubernetes environment. And so that's amazing. That's a whole new deployment model, but it's very robust. The learning curve is very high, and you've really got to have the infrastructure there for it. But it pays off in spades if you're doing something like a multi-tenant deployment of the product, or you're trying to scale it out for a really large solution. But I would say the majority of our installations are Windows, and that's fine. But as those servers become, but I don't want to say bloated or such, but as they become more less needy, and we can build it into a more simplified deployment like a container, you can deploy more of the product with less compute, because it doesn't need to have this massive server overhead in place just to run a web application. So Windows requires a lot of licensing fees, and simplifying ourselves to where we can run in a Linux-based Docker container means that we're pulling ourselves into a lower cost tier of deployment, especially when you come into cloud. That really becomes powerful when you start to, again, make a multi-tenant deployment and have a lot of tenants instead of one set of infrastructure. So you can't do that in Windows today very easily. And so again, we still put out all both sets of installs, which unfortunately means Fabio's team has to build two sets of packages every time we do a release, but it's worth it because eventually that will be the future. And we'll probably step back from MSIs maybe several years from now, where we're deploying more Docker containers than we are Windows servers. Right now it's the other way around, but the future is in front of us. And so we need to be prepared for it. And we believe that, making our content more intelligent, being able to move that content around more swiftly, being able to display it and get it to our developers and our customers more robustly, in a more interactive way, and then being able to host it all. These are the key tenets of the product: to keep it simple but keep it effective and powerful. So I'm really happy with the future that we have in front of us. We just got to keep working towards getting there. And that's Fabio and I and Gwen's charge. But nonetheless, as we move forward, like each one, I'm going to break into each one of these a little more and expand a little bit on what they mean. So we talked about the idle system and using both the natural language search and the textual content that's in the idle to multi-document summarize. So basically, you can take a result set and summarize the whole result set. But yeah, that might be valid if you have the right query. If you try to look at everything, might not give you the best insights. But we're talking about taking multiple line items in like the result set for AppEnhancer, for example, and then summarize that, or somehow group it within a query and use the results of the query to get the content that's in that query, kind of like our ad hoc engine that we have today that doesn't need idle. That text that's behind the scenes is always there, and so when it's in idle, we can do more with it, and that's really the goal there around using the AI indexing tools within idle. The intelligent capture is more what we build into the product from what was formerly Captiva, and that's the Pix tools engine, which lets us do a lot of extraction, OCR, barcode supports. We can start to do zonal OCR, which we already kind of do with our rubber band OCR tooling, but this is something we could do on the indexing side. So we've had requests come into our exchange. We've had requests come into our standard RFP process saying, hey, we want to do more than just have a batch indexing drop where a user has to get involved. We'd like to have some rules to say, hey, what can we do to take this content a little further? Can we have files that are named a certain way so we can extract content from the file names? Can we have zonal OCR so we can look at certain areas on the page, kind of like what we used to do with Ermix? And maybe some of those basic Ermix use cases where they're only looking for two fields, you probably do that with a zonal OCR workflow instead of having a whole OTS or Ermix workflow just for that. So we can simplify the processes with this by having some of these built-in capabilities right in the product, like screen reading, being able to pull off of the green screens. The customers that needed it really liked it, because not everybody has green screens out there anymore, but there are certain property management and real estate management agencies that have a ton of tapes out there still, and they have mainframes and they have old green screens. And so there's still a need to get some scraping when you don't have an API to work with. Hopefully, most of the time we got an API to call. But in this case, we're also trying to put some of the data to work, not just looking at the images, but also looking at maybe a complex doc type. Maybe you're not even submitting an image, you're submitting a JSON file, and that JSON file has a lot of data in it that we can then pull out and put into our metadata search, but also we can transform it into maybe a visual document that has art in it or images or such. So it looks nice when the user opens it. But JSON allows us to transport a lot of content, including style, back and forth. And the same thing with XML. XML needs XSLT, but you can still put XML to work in a lot of different ways to make that to bring that data into the system. And if it's just an XML file, well, how do you display that? Okay, well, you can use an XSLT profile and maybe dress it up nicely so that the data is displayable in a more human readable format. But nonetheless, having those complex doc types are more geared towards developers and integrators that are using systems that are providing that kind of data back out. And it's got, it's like a package of information, which then needs to be turned into a document somehow. And that's what the goal is with that use case. We also want to better the batch automation. So, right, like I said earlier, our batches are just you get dropped in a batch. And if you're not using a tool like Captiva to do indexing, your batch is pretty generic, and you're gonna have to go in and do some transcription or indexing. Now, the rubber band OCR tool might make that a little easier, but it's still a manual process. But now that we have rubber band OCR, why can't we just draw the box and have it keep that box there and constantly look in that area and that region? Certainly possible. And so that's something we want to be able to do, is automate the way that we do batching to say, well, okay, we've got our batch management, we can drop a bunch of documents in, but maybe we can drop it in a folder or create a batch that does a little more, read some content and puts it into the system automatically, or maybe even reads the content and does a lot of auto indexing, which, we've got some ideas that have been brought up that are really good about how can we automate some of the bulk imports to the system to make it a little bit easier to read files and pull metadata out of file names rather than out of index and import text files. So again, automating our batch management to get stuff in more swiftly is another big piece around the whole capture part of the product. And then I mentioned the document viewer. That's that using the IO key view tool is really where it comes from to better view XML and JSON files. So it's all kind of around just putting that static content images to work by pulling the data out of it. I talked a lot about Flowable earlier, but just to recap here, it's the built-in workflow engine, and it's going to be free of charge. It comes out of the box with a product, and we're bundling it, so you don't have to install it. It just comes with the standard installation as part of our application. But it's really around simple review and approval. Take a look at this document and let me know that you've looked at it, and that's where the approve comes in. It's almost like a simple core signature workflow where all you want is to sign it and have it come back signed. Well, in this case, it'll come back with an approve that the user either approved or denied it. And so really it's a basic inbox slash workflow transaction with maybe 2 nodes in it. But it's built in. You won't have to have a developer do anything with it. You can just turn it on and have document routing turn it on for your application. That's the goal there. We have done the phase 1 integration already, and that's what you might not have seen, but it's there. Is the initial integration with the WIM and the EDB and the ability to read events and push them into the workflows there. But there's no UI to back that up. You'd have to go to the Flowable UI. And in this case, we're embedding Flowable into our application, so we kind of have to build our own UI. But the nice thing is we'll have a native workflow UI in the product that has connection to this Flowable engine. And it'll be like back in the day when we had action technologies built in. It was very powerful and simple. Older technology stack, but it really was nice to have a built-in workflow engine that we didn't have to go through a bunch of processes to configure and manage and then develop. It just works out of the box. So when we talk about our modern interfaces, like Gwen mentioned, the JADO engine is our new UI framework from OpenText, the jet-assisted takeoff, they call it. But it's really the front, the thing that lifts the whole application up and sets up the entire UI. And when you spin that up, our OT controls become available, and you see a really nice, clean UI that looks like all the others from OpenText. And the way that we built this is different than the way we architected the web access application. The web access application is very heavy because it's got its APIs built into it, and it's everything. It's the UI, it's the presentation, it's the data layer. It's all built into one app. We've separated things out, and we've created a unified web server that has all the backend components and some of the front end components, so that you have one web server you could deploy to get all your APIs available to you. as well as the viewer. And that would allow you to, punch in and just get to the viewer if you were using like the ISOMIT query style or using a REST interface to get to a URL. You won't have to transition back over to an interactive web server because really the REST service and the web server are two completely different IIS applications. And in that case, there's no sharing of session data between them. So you have to go create a new session. You might actually consume two licenses for a few minutes until the other one is relinquished. But having a unified web server means we simplify the licensing problems we might run into when we start to deal with cloud deployments, but we also allow a single place for a lot of the APIs that we use today. And on top of that, we're simplifying the API. So the REST service is going to be taken up one level to where it's a simpler set of resources to be able to do the things that you do the most. And that'll help our developers get off the ground more swiftly. And the learning curve might come down a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's about simplifying the entire stack so that we can consume it ourselves. And so now that we have this unified web server, which is basically the back end and the front end, a little bit of the front end. And when I say that, like the controls for the viewer and the common components within AppEnhancer, but otherwise, the JADO UI is its own application. So what I'll show you today is two different apps because we're continuing to deploy our existing UI, which is the web access application. That's still there because it's a separate application. The new applications are two new installers that ship with 25.2, which contain the web server and the web client. And the unified web server will eventually replace REST. And we'll probably discontinue the REST eventually because the REST will be built into the unified web server. You won't have to have a REST server and a web server. When you have all these different servers, it kind of does let you just distribute the load across multiple Windows machines, but the session management can be tricky because they're all separate applications running in this separate thread. And it's not like they're sharing a lot of data between them when it comes to session management. And so this helps us simplify the way that sessions are created, the way licensing is managed. But more importantly, the developer have better access to the back end. And so we've got these comprehensive set of APIs that are built inside of that web server. And then we built the backend, the unified web server. We built we call it the web client, which it is a client to the web server. So we actually have the new app is called AppEnhancer Web Client. And when I do the demo, I'll show you it so you can see the two new installs that we ship. But that's really how we do it. Our new UI requires these two components to be deployed so that you can have the back end and the front end that are part of the new UI. And over time, we'll retire that old stuff as we're convinced that our customers are happy with what's in the new stuff. So for a little while, Fabio's team has to ship two sets of UIs for AppEnhancer, the classic legacy UI that we all know and love, and then the new JADO UI that we're going to look at today. And at the moment, they're going to look similar because some of the controls from the old are in the new as we slowly add the JADO related stuff into play. JADO has a lot of different parts, and we've done like the login parts and the toolbars, and you'll see there's a lot of it there, but it's still being framed out. And so our goal is to have that done in 25.4. So that said, the last one that's more user facing is the desktop connector. I'm going to show that today. That follows the same standards as JADO. It doesn't use JADO. It uses a Windows presentation framework of some sort. I'm not sure which framework, but it's a desktop application and use desktop presentation framework, but it follows all the same standards that we follow with JADO. It's nice that we have a UX engineer dedicated to our team now, and we can have a consistent UI design discussion for all the components across the stack, so it doesn't look like different people built different parts of the product. It's consistent, and that's good. It really follows the modern standards. And that helps us follow modern web standards for accessibility as well. And I think that's one of the most important things about getting a new UI is being able to have a more functional UI for people that need accessibility. And again, that connector is replacing that desktop experience, and that's what we'll show you today. Lastly, when we talk about cloud and data management, similarly to what I've been showing in a lot of my demos over the last few releases is, we've had Azure capabilities out there, but we want to spread all the data. We want to be able to hit as many of the unique services that each one of these cloud providers has outside of what you would normally get, which is, maybe containers or Windows servers. Those are pretty commoditized. But like Azure SQL is Azure SQL, and it's a Microsoft SQL server sitting on top of as a service basically, so that you just subscribe, you build out your resources, and you've got database connection strings that you're working with, and they're all just floating out in different types of scaled models for the database. So it's Oracle has theirs. It's an autonomous database. AWS has a headless PostgreSQL database. We are planning on supporting them all. Today we support Azure SQL and Postgres. We're working on the autonomous database as we speak. It's part of our roadmap, but you probably won't see that till the end of the year. We also have storage services. Our out-of-the-box storage services are pretty generic today because we've got partners and OEMs that have built their their specific storage needs on top of the storage adapter framework. We had a legacy framework for a while that was built on our COM technology. We've replaced that with a pure .NET engine that allows you to build a storage adapter. We support Azure files though, AWS and GCP using basically CIFS over the web, which is secure if you set it up correctly. But it's still an older technology. It's not blob or anything like that. That's where you would use the adapter framework to build a specific connection to a specific type of storage system. And we're toying with the idea of adding some out-of-the-box capabilities there, like I said, so that you don't have to build the adapter. Maybe we'll build the adapter for AWS because that's what everybody wants is S3. We'll see which one we hit target first, but there is work to be done to make it easier to configure storage and maybe use less legacy style storage. At the end of the day, we're still storing a lot of our objects the same way because of the way we tag them in the database, but having them in a better storage medium means it's easier to maybe recover the data or distribute it. And lastly, as we build out what I mentioned in the container deployments of this product, it's about Kubernetes and being able to hyperscale the product. So customers like our big OEMs that have a massive platform or set of platforms to deploy for a multi-tenant environment or for multiple customers, this makes automation and upgrading and scaling and just maintenance and everything so much simpler than when you're dealing with a bunch of Windows servers or a bunch of Windows servers in a Citrix farm or some of the more legacy style deployments that we see out there. This is the future, and we're really committed to building out a more refined deployment model for this product and getting rid of some of the older things that are floating out there, like the component registration wizard, and things like that. So it's going to help us be a better product for cloud. And that doesn't mean everybody's moving to the cloud, but you could certainly run. Eventually, you'll be able to just run a little Kubernetes box internally if you want, like I do at my home lab for some of my media stuff. It's not that hard once you understand how it works to deploy any container on top of that. And so, really getting ourselves into Linux containers is going to open up a lot of opportunity for infrastructure deployments for AppEnhancer, whereas today we're very much stuck on Windows. Okay, so that said, I'd like to transition into showing you the latest release. We've got a few features that are really nice to look at, and then we'll kind of transition into our roadmap. And so give me one moment. I'm going to bring up my demo environment, make sure it's all functional. And while I do that, I think we've got a survey that Gwen and Fabio can show you. So they'll give you guys some time while I make sure my lab's all functioning. Gwen?
Fabio, do you want to post the link for that?
Yeah, I can do that. I guess I have to put in the Q&A session, right? Because the chat is disabled. Okay, just give me 1 second here. Got a new thread going in the Q&A. Let's see if that works for everyone.
We'll give everyone just a couple minutes to fill that out. Gwen and I really look forward to looking at this, and we're really excited to collect some of this information. I've been waiting for months to get a hold of some of this just to get a test of what the strata of versions are out there, and the more people that join this and fill this out, the more we get an understanding of what what's out there and what your desires are.
Yeah, so there's 11 questions in this survey, so you can start now and then you can also fill it in as we're going along. The survey doesn't expire, so just as long as you have that link whenever you want to fill that in.
Great. So that said, you can work on that now, and continue to work on it as we go through the discussion. I'm going to start showing you 25.2. So this is the new unified web server, and I'll just bump really quickly over to the Windows machine that's running this to show you that there's like a new installer for the web client. And if you go look in the deployed web applications here, you'll notice that we have the client and server now. Traditionally, we would deploy our services, our REST, our admin, and our AppEnhancer web. These are all separate installs and components, and a lot of them have redundancies between them. Each one of them has the same library to do certain functions. Each one of them has certain web APIs that are duplicated. It'll help us a lot to consolidate code to have a single web server that's got a lot of these server components and have a nice, clean, simple web client that's very fast because it doesn't have to load all this backend stuff. It's just loading the UI and it's running the JADO frameworks. And so having the web client is going to speed up our user's experience. So you don't have to have so much overhead to run it because it's sitting on top of this web server that's serving it. And you could actually hyperscale the web servers in multiple containers and have a couple different web clients just touching those. So it's so new that it's going to take us a couple of releases with all the Docker images to figure out how to build a document around performance testing and like how much we can actually support with this type of model. Right now, we're pretty comfortable with what we know we can do with Windows. We might get better performance and throughput when we're using containers because there's no UI elements that need to be loaded. There's a lot less overhead. And so it's possible we can get a lot more bang for our buck when we're talking about containers. But this server is really the big piece that's now serving all the web UI, all the APIs that the web client consumes. And so if we move back, this is the new JADO login page. I have a couple different tenants in this environment. This is an Azure environment. So we have one VM that's running everything because it's not, we don't have a million users here, but we have a few different tenants. So we have a city college, we have a healthcare tenant and a finance tenant, and then our storage account. And these are all, the main database for our, configuration stuff and global stuff is just a standard Azure SQL database or a hyperscale database. And then we've got our SQL Server databases and one server that's running all of those. And so it's a pretty simple deployment, but even this is a lot of overhead because of all the VM and, we have a SQL Server. And so we could probably consolidate this as we get to containers to not have to have so much compute. But at the end of the day, it's doing a really nice job at serving this environment. And if we go back to AppEnhancer, I'll just log in this. I'm going to go to the HR environment and just there's one app in this one particular one, but the new UI doesn't look much different than the old one at the moment. As you notice, like the main pane is still a pull out from the old, but we have a new toolbar, we have a new menuing system, we've got new users settings that you can configure for they're all the same settings, but they're just distributed in the new forms. Not too much different, but it's using the new framework. So this is a pretty fast UI. I'll just bring up basic query that's saved, and I'll bring my document up. And it, depending on my render server and the type I got it might be the first time that I've rendered since I just kicked this on too. So the rendering might be slow at the first run, but it'll be fast after the JIT. But nonetheless, you'll notice the viewer is nearly the same. The indexing pane nearly the same. Let me just put a couple more jobs in. Okay. Like I said, there we go. I'm just being impatient. It's the first run. So as I mentioned, the query results, the main search, this doesn't look much different than the existing UI. It's packaged a different way. And that's where we have, the login panes, the toolbars, the main core components. We had to build a foundation first. And now the goal is to go in and slowly replace one at a time the different components with the JADO components over the next release. So in 25.4, you'll see this flesh out more and more and more. But right now it's very similar. And if there's something that you don't have here, you can always revert. This is the same environment. If I go, we still have the basic AppEnhancer application. This is AppEnhancer admin. Let me take that out. Oh. Yeah, so this is that same HR application. Notice we're sharing tokens to log me right in. So it's not gonna, if your user is in the JADO UI and they move over to this one, we're not gonna pull new license. We know that they already had a session with the server. So we're smart about that at least. But you'll have to revert to this if you needed functionality that was only here. One of the things that's here that's not in JADO is this floating preview. it's hard to implement in JADO right now. We're working with the JADO team to figure out how to do this type of a floating document view within the framework, because it's not something that Content Suite uses very often. So like you won't see this float preview work, but all the other, the double click on the row, all the contextual menus, they're the same. And so again, I invite you to take a look and get an idea what the preview is. And if you're just doing basic search and retrieval, you might like it. It's a little faster, but it's going to take another release or two to get all of our UIs trained over to JADO. And that includes eventually our admin UI, which is ancient, based on XSadmin. And so our admin UI was just a full port to the web of all the forms that we had in Windows. And so it's clunky, but it works. And there's a lot of logic in there. And so, that's another phase. So it's a 3-phased approach. And you'll see that when we get to the roadmap to be able to get all the JADO stuff in. The first phase was moving ourselves into a new Angular framework that's part of JADO. So we have a lot of Angular code. And then adopting the JADO frameworks on top of that. So it's been a long haul, but it's worth it to be using the modern standards that OpenText uses hopefully across all our products. That said, this 25.2 is more about, that new UI when it comes to the web stuff. This web UI does not have major enhancements. We still have the new rubber band OCR, and we've tweaked it a little bit to be a little more efficient or effective, I guess. There's some settings that the OCR tool itself in the library under the hood there's adjustments that can be made there. And so, we're refining things as we go, but this is probably the UI a lot of your customers are going to stick with until the JADO UI is complete in 25.4. So if you have any questions about the JADO UI, you can ask them in the Q&A, and we'll hit them when we get to the Q&A section. But I'd like to show you the connector now. So I'm going to switch. And it's in my system tray over here, so I'm just going to pop it open. And now here's our configuration screen for the connector. The connector runs in the system tray at all times, unless you quit the application. But it's a single install, and it runs in your system tray. And basically, as you minimize, it'll stay down there, or you can open it up and you can configure it. So it's configured, since the unified web server is still being fleshed out with the JADO stuff, we're connecting to the existing AppEnhancer environment, which, as you notice, we have 2 URLs here. This is one of the problems that we're solving with the unified web server, is allowing a consolidation of a lot of these tech stacks for like the web access parts, which is the user interface, and the REST interface, which is that developer interface. Eventually, there's a crossover once the developer wants a viewer, and so that's what this is for. Is we connect to everything in the stack. Same server has both apps deployed. Be in different servers if you wanted, but once you connect these things, it will pull your application list and your apps. And now we've got all the data cached here to be able to do search and retrieval. And so if I go here, I can build like an AP search. It'll load all my fields, including the full text stuff if we want to run that search. And I'll just run open search. We'll get our results set just like you would in web access. And we can get to the document just like you would in web access by clicking on clicking on the link here where the preview would be. And this will just take you to the UI, since we have all those URL integrations, and we can just pass our tokens in and get to our document. And now we're in a pop-up window with the document viewer. You could, where we're toying was figuring out how to, it's not figuring out, it's figuring out where and how we would display it to put this. We could put this in an iframe inside of the connector application so that it floats inside the app. Right now, it opens in a separate window, and you have a full screen window of the document as a pop-up, basically, in whatever your browser is. And then you can just shut that down, and it will close off that particular session with the browser side. And then this contents, there is no session right now. We are using REST to get this data, so it's very transactional. So that's why there's 2 APIs here. We're connecting to REST to get the data parts, run the queries, get all the stuff that you're requesting. We're using the web access UI to display the document. So that's how that works. We still have the basic imports for files and for printed PDFs to get data in as an indexing tool. But really the big goal here was to have a search and retrieval capability, which is one of the big things people use App Extender Desktop for, is just to get to documents quickly. And this is a pretty quick interface. If you go back and look at like that HR search, it does dynamically pull the field set down. So, again, it's pulling it out of the REST service. So if you update and add a new field, it'll almost instantly make its way down into this level because we're pulling it all when we run those queries. but here's the result set. And again, we could open 2 documents at a time, or we can open, you click that link and it'll open one, which, yeah, here we go. And so here's the document, and just a single page, so there's no thumbnails. All the document controls are available now, as if they were logged into the web. But they didn't have to go through the front door. They went in through the API using our client to our API, which is the connector. So that's all that's why this is a very lightweight application, because it doesn't have to have all the tools and frameworks in place to connect to the backend. It connects to the REST service. Much more modern take on desktop deployment. So we still have a desktop presence, but it's very light, and we can continue to add to it. And so we've been doing a really good job at just keep innovating here. Now that we've got the framework of the application, the basics of the application, we can start really refining this and adding much more functionality. So where this is the direct replacement for AppEnhancer Desktop. So if you have questions about the connector, certainly hold those and bring them to the QA, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. And lastly is our here. Yeah, so we talked about JADO phase 1. We talked about the connector. Lastly is that cloud-based deployment. You saw my Azure environment. That's still running on a VM, but we have a hybridized environment that we've helped to build out for one of our OEM partners, which is a deployment of some of the things that we must have a VM for because we don't have a containerized deployment of it. And then the other components are containers. So it's a hybrid environment in AWS, but we have certified that it will work. And so for those of you that are planning or thinking of putting your AppEnhancer environment in AWS, we will support the Postgres SQL database, which is a headless database, SQL as a service base, or Postgres as a service. And then your storage technology, whatever you use in AWS, it would have something tied to a CIFS share, obviously. And then your compute, which is today, some of those components are still Windows Server if you did not deploy the containers that you could deploy. So like the idle engine we don't have a container for it yet. And so you would probably, if you had idle, you'd have to deploy the VM of it at the moment. And so we're working to get the entire platform moved into that, but there's a lot of components. And so little by little, we're getting there. All the core components are containerized though, so that's good. Okay, so now that we've talked about the latest release, which I hope you guys all get on your, in your hands within the next week or so. So it's coming out here at the end of the month, and so this is a bit of a announcement preview of it. But I'm excited to get some feedback on the updates in the connector, especially, but what you guys think of the direction for the JADO UI and things like that. So yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the roadmap, but first I want to talk about our release cadence. This particular release, 25.2, is unique, and we're switching to a model where we have 2 releases a year, and one is an innovation release, we call it, and that's where we can put more consolidated features around a specific kind of technology or a specific use case, but where we're maybe partnering with an OEM to do a very specific thing for them. Or in this case, we did the connector was one of our new features that we really needed with some API improvements behind it. But we wanted to get some new stuff like the JADO UI out there, so touch it and play with it, or like our flowable capability for developers who want to touch it. So some of those, the flowable came out in 24.4, so we really didn't have that kind of release cadence, but we're trying to shift our roadmap so that we can have new stuff and more innovative stuff in the innovation release. And that allows us to do rapid iteration and less comprehensive testing, so that we can get things out more quickly. We can build more features, but maybe there might be a couple bugs, but we're getting a lot out there. The long-term edition refines anything that maybe needed it because we're moving more swiftly, but also rolls all those features up into a more stable package that we can heavily test. And it's more testing on security, testing on pen testing, all the whole barrage of tests we do, which there are less tests in the innovation release. And really the goal here is to free up bandwidth up front so that we can work on innovation and not build the same stuff both times. And it was mostly a lot of savings in testing, a lot of savings in QA, and our team is pretty well versed with things. So it's not like we're going to miss a bunch of bugs. We know what to look for, especially if we're looking for things within a new feature that we've just developed. And so this is going to help us give you more features, hopefully, but also you'll be able to jump onto feedback release, if you will, to look at some of the new stuff. And then if you want to wait, and for production readiness, that's more 25.4, which is a long term. And also, it allows us to have less lines of code out there for support. We can retire the innovation releases because really the support is around the long-term release. And you'll notice a lot of vendors are moving to this model because they're running the same problem we do. It's like too many code lines. 25.2 and 4, that's every year we have 2 more code lines. We need to have less so that we can do more work on innovation and less work on maintaining these code lines. So I hope that makes sense, but it's really about streamlining the path to long-term support and continuous innovation of the product. Okay, so one of my least favorite slides to talk about is stuff that's going away because people love the stuff that's here. We don't want to discontinue stuff without giving you something to use in a future product, and we've done really well in the web to make parity between the desktop and the web. And we replaced our legacy desktop. There's full parity now with the legacy desktop. There's nothing that you can't do that you can do in the web that's on the desktop application. And so in this case, we no longer deploy desktop as part of our deployable packages. The last version was 20.4, and that version actually end of life this year. So if you're running 20.4, you should be concerned right now because the support costs might go up for you if you want to continue running it because it's based on the 20.4 packaging. We've replaced that with the connector, and with this 25.2 connector, you get the search and retrieval capabilities too. So, I mean, there's not everything, but we want feedback. What is so important in desktop that you need to keep using it? I want to know because they'll build it into the connector for you. And so, evaluating the connector is important for me for customers so that we can see what our desktop footprint needs to look like to be effective for your customers that really liked it. Search and retrieval was one of the top things when I last talked to a couple of customers recently that they just use that. That's the bread and butter of the AppEnhancer or AppEnhancer environment. But it's a desktop application and it's not very secure and it's hard to update and it's kind of clunky and it crashes on certain types of PDFs. And so it eventually it's not going to work at all. And the whole point here is we're not going to be testing it anymore with our future releases of AppEnhancer. Up to this point, we've been testing legacy desktop continuously with every release that comes out so that we can maintain some continuity for those users that continue to use it. But this version does not do that. Our team and it's freeing up bandwidth for us to not have to go through that last set of regression testing with 20.4 to make sure that it functions. And certainly we've had some bugs like III doesn't work anymore. And a couple of the other tools don't work anymore because they've already luckily been replaced in the web. But you can't expect a full experience today with desktop anymore. And so if you're running 20.4, you should be concerned that it could break by the end of the year if you upgrade your backend. And so it's really important to consider the connector now that it's got search and retrieval as well, and consider the other features that you might need to have in connector because every release I want to put out more connector stuff if we can. And that now that we've got the core application, we can start adding nuggets to it, small features here and there to make it more robust and more effective. And that's the direction for desktop. And we're also retiring web services. Eventually, we're looking at 20.5.4 being our last version of the SOAP services. This is our I shouldn't say ancient. This is like our Web 2.0 stack for all the API. It's a great API, but because of all the XML and all the chatter, it's kind of slow. It doesn't stream well. There's some issues with it if you're using it for a more high volume environment, I should say. It's a good API, but we have a REST API that does everything much more effectively, and so there's really no reason to be using this web service anymore. And we don't have features that we could build. There's certain features that haven't been built back into it because you have to pull the whole stack apart and rebuild the stack. And it's legacy in our opinion. It's not our modern service. And so rather than have to go back and try to build in OTDS capability and some of the SPS licensing capabilities and other stuff that's recently come out over the last couple of releases, there's no need to do this, and we don't want to maintain it because again, we want to remove the amount of legacy code we're trying to update so that we can get Fabio's team working on innovation. And this is one of those things we need to retire. We're not just going to drop it. It's 25.4 will be the last release, but we'll start by trying to put it on the same kind of testing path that we had 20.4 desktop. If we could at least just test the package to make sure it works with the backend because it's consuming a lot of the same libraries. Good, we could probably do that, but we're not going to build it anymore and distribute it anymore because the last thing I want is a customer to think that that's a modern component they should be integrating with because they shouldn't. That's what the REST service is for. And lastly, a few releases ago, we released the SPS licensing, which is built on top of OTDS. And OTDS is the central authentication and directory service and licensing component for OpenText. We use it for a large volume of our product. And we've already translated our licensing over to SPS licensing, which is running inside OTDS. So you can get one or the other today. Most of our customers are still on CTS if they've already deployed a long time ago, because that's the legacy license server. But as we move to the future, our plan is to retire the legacy license server altogether, and eventually you will be forced to use OTDS for your licensing for the product. And if OTDS is a great thing to use if you don't have central authentication somewhere in your environment, you can use OTDS for that. And it can handle all your tokens and your group management as well as your licensing. And the best part about doing that is you get great reporting and a lot of high availability. So it's the future. We have no high availability in CTS. It is a single point of failure right now in the product. You can do things to make it redundant by, enabling a couple different VMs and using like DRS or other technologies that are virtualized technologies, right, to be able to swiftly bring the server back online. But it's not automated, and it's not robust like you would see in OTDS and its containerized deployment or even its Tomcat deployment. So or whatever, it's standard server deployment. It's the preferred method now for licensing products at OpenText, and eventually we will not be able to issue those CTS licenses. So just keep that in mind. We'll give you warning when it happens, but we're thinking 25.4 might be the last release of CTS. Now, that doesn't mean the product's not going to work with CTS. That's another thing we'll test to make sure the license server is accessible. Again, that's a pretty mature component, so I can't see us breaking it very much. It's a very simple system, the CTS licensing, and so we'll test that for a while. We'll probably, as feature complete as far as 25.2 is concerned, we're not going to be distributing it anymore. But 25.4 might be the last release of that if we if there's not a lot of complaints about it, or if there's not a major concern about it. Okay, so moving forward, I want to talk about the community. I think it's really important to highlight the value of this community. If you look at some of the things that we get from you guys, we'd never had this kind of value from EMC and from some, here it is. Yeah, just getting feedback from customers, getting new ideas. We never had a facility like this where our users could come in and vote on ideas and give us direct feedback on what they want to see in the product without having to go through support and fill out an RFE and maybe have it get lost in the mail or something. This is the best way for us as a product team to see how you want the product to go, as far as features, and to see things you're concerned about in the discussion groups. You're talking not just to us, but you're talking to other customers, that can come and chime in on your discussions. We also have news and events here. So like this webinar, I have a new licensing guide that we put out recently for you to help you understand how to license the product better. If you're on the sales side, what licenses are available for AppEnhancer, how is it sold? We haven't put out a document like this in a while, and so it's just a simple way for you to understand, how we license it today and what the cost would be if you were trying to put out a footprint of the platform. There's a version currency document. Oops, I'm not on this page. Look, just like
I've shared the link to this community portal in the chat or Q&A post if anyone wants that link.
Yeah, and so we have when AppEnhancer 25.2 releases, we'll have a new version of this comparison chart. But this is a great way to give your customers or any of your partners, anybody that's deploying the platform, a good idea of what you get when you upgrade. What are the features that come with each one of these releases that I get as I move up the stack, and the benefits that I get from those features. It's just very clear and easy document for a customer to go through and see, where is the innovation happening, what's beyond the release that they have. If you're only on 23.2, there's a lot that's come out since then that you might like, and you might use to make your knowledge workers more effective. And so in that case, maybe you really need a multi-plugin Outlook support for your product so that you can pull from multiple mailboxes for your workflow or for whatever your use case is. And so that's something you're going to need to get 24.2 or earlier. And so in any case, or 24.2 or later. So it's just a good way for you to see this spectrum of innovation for the product. Lastly, back to
Cody, sorry if I may, I just wanted to add that I'm also posting into the community the new patch builds. If you go to the tips news tab there, so you're gonna see, you guys probably already noticed that we're moving away from the hotfix model and going more into more frequent patch builds to bundle those fixes into more structured builds. And sometimes you're waiting for a fix and you don't know if your build is available. So you can now use the community for that. So the patches are going to be posted there. And from there, there's going to be a link to the My Support site. From there, there's also an attachment with the release notes with all the fixes, including the build. So hopefully that makes it easier for people waiting for fixes through patch builds.
Definitely. Thank you, Fabio. So yeah, the value of this site is just centralizing a lot of things, and we're starting to add articles that are of importance, any kind of announcements, and we're starting to add videos. I'm working on my first YouTube video for a product overview of AppEnhancer 25.2, and so there's a lot of new content that's coming out that you'll be able to leverage for you and your customers. Okay, so back to the roadmap. Lastly, before we get to the roadmap, we are still building out our JDO stuff. Like I said, the new UI is coming, and we are excited to show you some of those elements. And we don't want to surprise you with something that's completely out there, that's not going to fit with your knowledge workers kind of a path of work with their workflow. And so certainly we want to make this intuitive, easy to use without having to read a giant technical manual. It should be naturally easy to use. And so from what I've seen, it looks very intuitive, but we want you to see it. And so this link, and we'll put this link isn't easy to copy, so I have the URL in my notepad. We'll post it to the chat. But this is very important for you if you're interested in having a voice in what goes into the new UI, because there's a few design decisions we need to make in ways we present certain things, and we want to make sure we get the community's feedback so that we don't make the wrong decision. Okay, so let's get to the roadmap. I'm proud that we are just delivering our 25.2 release. So we delivered 24.4 at the end of last year, and that had the retention services, our OCR indexing, the viewer for O365, and that the backend flowable integration. We also put the indexing tools into the connector, so you can index documents with using the connector, which is important so that we could get field data into the connector so we could work with it. And then the cloud readiness at this point was enhancements to the admin API to support some of the things that we need in OEM, the multi-tenant support for OPA for AppWorks, OTDS multi-tenant support to support the AppWorks environment that we're doing in multi-tenant, and then some basic VM support for AWS. Now we have AWS containerized and VM support, so we can deploy deploy the whole platform on AWS. The desktop connector has now search and retrieval and the integrated viewer that we can call. And it's more of a connected viewer. If it was integrated, I think it would be an iframe, and that's something we're looking at as well to have it contained in the application. But we're still doing some design work there. Nonetheless, my mouse is really touchy. Yeah, so that's with the connector today. The UI phase 1 work, which is again the core frameworks for JDO are now there. It's running in the new AppEnhancer web client. I know it's a web server, but it's a web client because it's a client to our unified web server, and that still allows you to have the entirety of the web access applications sit independently with this. Yet they can share certain elements for sessions because they're on the same server, so that we don't have to pull a new license if we have to switch to the old UI. So our dev team has done really well at finding a way to have the legacy UI still be there, and then have the JDO UI sit right next to it. So it's up to you guys to figure out which one you want. Most customers will probably stick with what they know. Right now they look a lot the same, so you can probably switch and not really get a much different experience. But as we flesh it out, it will be much different. And so I'm excited to see that, and I think you'll be excited to see what's in that survey, because that'll show you where we're going. We're also putting in hotkeys for the desktop connector, so we can quickly bring up applications or indexing screens rather than having to thumb through the screens. This is where we start to see stuff from the flowable integration bubble up into the UI space, is the predefined document workflows, where we can start to do document routing. Our biggest goal is to have at least one document routing workflow for 25.4, so you can do basic routing with the doc engine using EDB, WIM combo against the flowable tool. So that's big because we don't have that and haven't had that for years. When it went away, a lot of customers got upset because we basically asked them to buy an enterprise class workflow to route documents. And that's not so great. And some people are using like Core Signature and other little hackery to kind of other tools that have basic workflow, because Core Signature has a basic doc approval workflow that you don't even sign it, you just approve it. I know of a couple customers that use Core Signature just to do approval workflow. It's a weird way to do document routing, but it does function. And so we want that to be built into the product. You shouldn't have to have a subscription to do doc routing. And so in this case, that's what that's for. The viewer is, again, we talked about advanced doc types. This is for some of the OEMs that have like really complex data that's coming into the system they're storing in like XML format or JSON, and transforming that is important. And IDLE has a lot of cool tooling to be able to work with that type of content, which we never had before. And lastly is, barcode support on the indexing side for the user interface, and new policies for retention. Our retention engine needs overhaul to be compliant with modern standards, and it's a long time coming because we had to pull out all the C++ components first and put in a .NET engine and a more modern engine, and we've got that today. It took one whole release to do that. I know it's technical debt, but it's very, very important for the performance and the capabilities, because we needed that new engine to be able to power the new retention policies. And so now this will be able, the policy engine will be updated. So the front side of the retention module. And so that's really what's the brunt of 25.4. It's a lot of work. Our team is already transitioning from 25.2 to 4. We're in our GA period. So this is the next big one. And this will be the LTE release. I'll probably mark that on my roadmap at some point, but we should just basically know that all the .2 releases are the innovation releases, and all of the .4 releases will be the long-term support releases. And as we move out into the roadmap, the future, again, I can't say enough about how some of the case management use cases that we use this platform for would benefit from some type of basic, like what we have in our Copilot, or what you get with Aviator, or what you would get with like a LLM model or something like that. You can summarize content that has a vast amount of data in it into smaller bits of data that are more insightful for your backend, for your end user. We can also extract index details if you wanted. You could probably use some of this tooling to do indexing work, which is kind of funny because it's a new approach to an old problem that we've done a long time ago with like Kofax or like Captiva and other tools. And as AI tooling becomes more robust, you can start replacing some of those old machine learning style tools. And that's something we might consider here, but it's more about extracting details and insights from those documents using our AI tooling. When we talk about intelligent indexing and how we classify documents, we really need to implement the cascade list, which is like a parent-child style relationship. Think like city-state zip or city-state county or something like that, where there's nested lists that are populated based on the first selection of the parent list. So, if I select Colorado, I should only see the counties in Colorado, not all the counties in the country. And so, this is a great way to sift data for indexing and for classification of documents. We also want to add data lookups beyond what we have with our very rudimentary archive, our very rudimentary key reference import wizards that we've got today. You could put a DTS package or some kind of SQL job or something to move that data in if you got really creative to maybe automate our existing legacy process. Still pretty legacy for auto index. We'd like to add something to be able to maybe go to a basic database lookup with a query, or pull from an API like you would from Google or Yahoo or something for weather or something like that. So data lookups are not just databases anymore. And so it's our ability to be able to go do these lookups against maybe a web service in the company that's got master data in it, or maybe from a database somewhere that's elsewhere to the AppEnhancer database. Really, this has been needed for a long time, and partners and customers have had to go the extra mile to do the wiring for themselves to get that filling that they need to be able to get that data to propagate or to pull back into AppEnhancer from another system. So it's very important for the backend stuff and for bubbling up data and to make it easier for you to index content. Virtual folders is another one that's been on this list for a long time. We want to implement this in 26. And that would allow you to take the metadata structure that we have for AppEnhancer and flip it around and turn it into a foldering-based structure, which we've never had. And a lot of traditional products have that. And AppEnhancer is sometimes maybe not on top of the list of selection because it doesn't have foldering. We've got a great way to get to content through metadata searches, but it's a targeted search-based way of getting to it. We don't really have a way to browse to content, to go look for it, only knowing like maybe some core information from the hierarchy. And so you would be able to define your hierarchy based on your indexes and metadata. And I'll step over to the UI to make this make more sense. But like, see these fields here, we can define which field is the top level field that we would use to define the folder that's the root folder. So maybe it would be like a job code folder, and we would have all the people that have this job code would then fall in that folder. And maybe your next level would be like the last name, first name combo or something like that. So we might be able to combine fields to create one folder out of them, or have each field be an independent folder. But you can define a virtual architecture for a virtual hierarchy, I should say, for your foldering right out of our metadata. And whatever that data is at the time of the query results run will determine how that is distributed in the folder structure. So we've mocked some of that up, and it is logically possible to do this, and it makes a lot of sense. And it would apply differently to different applications in the system, because obviously there's different field specifications for each one of these applications. And so for you, you have a lot of flexibility on how your foldering structure would work, and you could flip it on the fly because it's metadata driven. It's not foldering. And so the worst part about foldering is you get stuck with a bunch of folders and it's harder to organize it once it gets there. You have to do a lot of movement. This would not force you to do that. You could dynamically change your folder structure on the fly by adjusting the way that these folders are displayed, just by changing the way the metadata is, the hierarchy of the metadata. Maybe you only want one layer. You could just say doc type is your folder structure. This might not be the best application to demonstrate that, but nonetheless, you have a lot of flexibility to define the architecture of that foldering structure. And I think that could be very powerful for certain use cases where customers really want to browse to content. Hope that makes sense. Coming back to the roadmap, we are talking about intelligent viewing and rendering. We are talking about, when we're talking about that, we're talking about potentially adopting more of the OpenText-centric viewing and rendering technologies, so that Fabio's team doesn't also have to, on top of being a document management team, also build a viewer. We're a viewer team too, and that's kind of weird at OpenText because we have a whole department that builds the viewer for a lot of technology platforms. And here we are building our own viewer. And the reason we've done it is because it's simple, it's effective, it's fast, it's easy, and it's low cost. And so all those things say, well, gosh, we keep it in the platform because it's worked. But as we get more into this standardized framework that we're using, and JADO and all the components underneath, like those are a lot of the things that are needed to power some of the viewing technology within OpenText. And so it's worth us evaluating working with our more centralized technology stack for viewing and rendering so that we get faster updates to that. We had a PDF issue that's really recently come up. If any of you are on the phone that dealt with it, there was a library that got updated from the PDF actually it was on the other side. It's a PDF generation tooling library to create PDFs out in the field, but it breaks the PDFL that we consume within our product, both in the render server and in desktop. There's already been patches put out. Now, the patch we looked at earlier in the community talks all about it. So if you're haven't experienced this problem, you might want to go check that patch out. But really what it is these older technologies that we're using to render the content are being affected by newer technologies upstream that are creating the content. And so we have to be able to stick with modern standards of processing all the newest styles of creating a PDF. And in this case, I think Google owns the company that builds the library, but there was a small change through a feature that not a lot of people use. I guess obviously Adobe didn't, but it literally crashes the PDFL. And so for us, if we start leveraging the intelligent viewing, we don't have to go do that and rebuild our viewer. Our intelligent viewing team is going to build it for all the different people in OpenText to consume it. So we'll get updates more swiftly, and our team won't get distracted trying to fix the viewer. We'll go get the latest code from our viewing team and integrate it. And I'm not saying this is immediate. We're still, again, this is out in the outskirts of the roadmap for a reason. There's some research that needs to be done to make sure that there's feature parity. And probably the most difficult is the annotation stuff, unraveling all that and moving it into this mechanism is really taking ours apart and translating it. And so it's going to be a bit of work, but I really think that there's a lot of value in using the more robust viewing technology that OpenText provides, and keeping our team focused on document management and document stuff, and less the viewing of the images.
Cody, just a side, I think we should start wrapping up because we have quite a few questions for the end
Sure.
of the session
Okay,
as well.
so yeah, we're right at the end of the list here. Really, I talked about folders. In the main and the application, we're also adding drop zones and folders in the screen scraper to the desktop, and then Kubernetes and Helm. That's just Kubernetes support for the containers. So that's the roadmap. If you have questions about any of this, it's time to ask.
Perfect. So there's quite a lot of questions in the Q&A. I can go through and read them if you'd like. So the first, I think, very good question: when will version 25.2 be available?
Fabio?